So it is a few minutes after 6, and I'll call the meeting to order, the Community Development Commission. So do you want to take roll, Braden?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Jones,
Here.
Commissioner Green,
Here.
Commissioner Freeman, Commissioner Silvas,
Here?
Commissioner Diana,
Here.
Commissioner Williams. Thank you.
So we have a quorum. Thank you, Braden. The first order of business on our agenda is to approve the minutes. And on October 25th, we first had a public hearing followed by a regular meeting. So I'll first ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the public hearing that was held on October 25th.
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? No discussion. I'll ask for a vote on that motion to approve the minutes of the public hearing of October 25th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion passes and the minutes of the public hearing from October 25th are approved. Next are the minutes from our regular meeting, also on October 25th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for our regular meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Corrections? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for a vote on the minutes of our regular meeting on October 25th. All in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it and the motion carries. So both the public hearing minutes and the regular meeting minutes are approved. Are there any additions to our agenda for this evening?
There are no additions to
No
the agenda.
additions? Okay, thank you, Braden. Is there any public input? There's no one here in person, but was there any email or correspondence received?
No, we did not receive any email correspondence or written correspondence.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Braden. And that takes us to the presentations, including the staff report.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. So the first item on the staff update is just an update on what I presented about at our last meeting in October, the Housing and Homeless Innovation Consolidated Application Program, which the City of Urbana is doing in partnership with the City of Champaign. It's a combined pool of over $5 million in funding for housing and homeless programming in the community. So that grant application opened on November 4th. That same day, staff from the City of Urbana and the City of Champaign held an informational session at Champaign City Council chambers that was open to anyone who was interested in applying. We had pretty good attendance at that meeting. We were also able to answer some questions about the program and how to apply. The applications are open until December 12th. So that's when the portal will close and all applications will be due. But coming up next week on November 28th, which is next Monday, Urbana and Champaign staff will be holding a second informational session, just to answer any last-minute questions applicants might have about the program. That will be taking place at the Urbana Free Library in the Lewis Auditorium, which is on the lower level, and that'll be on Monday, 12:30 to 1:30. So anyone who is interested in applying or who currently has an application open can attend and ask questions or learn more about the program. The City of Urbana is hosting the online application portal, so all applications will be completed and submitted online. And then the City of Champaign is hosting the website for the grant program. So I don't have the URL, the web address right in front of me, but it's hosted on the City of Champaign's website in the neighborhood services section of the website. And we are updating a list of frequently asked questions on the website, so anyone can go there and kind of learn more about about the program. There's also a video recording of the first informational session. So kind of next steps with this, as I mentioned, application portal will be closing December 12th. That week of December 12th, City of Urbana and City of Champaign staff will be meeting scoring applications, ranking them, kind of seeing, what we get and what we can fund. And then once we have recommendations, those will be coming to before all of you in at our next meeting, which I'll get to in a minute. But those will be coming before you for recommendation to City Council. And so we'll be briefing you on the applications that staff recommends. We'll be kind of talking about the scoring process and how that worked. And so then you'll be able to review those. And, if you have any questions or concerns, you can let us know at that time. And then once you have forwarded your recommendations to council, those will go to council committee of the whole in January, early January. And then we hope to start executing agreements late January into February, because we know there are a lot of agencies in the community that need the funding. It's a big need in the community, homelessness and affordable housing. So we want to get the money out the door as quickly as possible to agencies that are really doing a lot of great work in the community. So you'll definitely be updated on that process as we go forward. Any questions about that process? So the next item is, Sheila wanted me to mention, and I apologize, it's not actually on the staff report. She just wanted me to quickly mention the city's ARPA process. That's not directly related to any of the HUD grants that you all oversee. It's kind of a separate process because American Rescue Plan funds are through the Treasury Department. So we don't really have a role in overseeing it, but she just wanted me to let you know that that application process closed, I believe, on the 15th of November. So city staff are currently reviewing applications for ARPA funds, scoring them, and then I believe the week of December 13th, there will be 3 days of presentations where applicants will come before Urbana City Council to provide brief presentations on their proposals, on their applications, and then City Council will ultimately be making funding decisions about that funding. So the ARPA, American Rescue Plan, it's about $10 million in funding that is meant to address or respond to the effects of the pandemic. So you can watch those sessions on UPTV, or you can attend as well if you would like. So that's just a little FYI on that process. So the next item, and this gets to what I was saying earlier about our next meeting. It's, December is always a little tricky because we all get very busy and there's a lot going on. So in your packet is the 2023 meeting schedule. So you'll have all of that for reference. So that is just good to keep tabs on. For December, traditionally, because our regular Community Development Commission is the fourth Tuesday, it's always like the Tuesday right after Christmas. So we typically cancel that meeting and then have a special meeting scheduled earlier in December. We did that last year, and that tends to be our typical process. There are some scheduling issues with that this year, however. So we have the possibility of not having a meeting in December at all, and instead scheduling a special meeting on January 3rd, which would be the first Tuesday in January. So that's an option. The other option would be to do a special meeting on December 20th, which we realize is the week of Christmas, so might not be the best time. But those are the two options that we have right now. We will need to do a special meeting again because we can't have our regular meeting in December, and there are some items that are time sensitive, so we can't wait until our January meeting on the 24th of January. So I will be sending out an email just to kind of gauge, what's the best date. Staff would prefer the January 3rd date if that works for commissioners, just to kind of get over the holidays and, so anyway, is still a little bit in flux. But once we decided, we will send out the notice like we do for every other meeting. We'll have the notice of canceling our regular meeting and then send out the notice of the special meeting. If we do end up scheduling the special meeting on January 3rd, that will mean we'll have 2 meetings in January, which is a little unusual, but we will need to keep that January 24th meeting as well. So we're potentially looking at having a meeting on January 3rd and then a meeting again on January 24th. But so that's just a little heads up on that. And if you could, let me know your availability, that would help. And then we'll make sure to notice the meeting and any cancellation appropriately through the city clerk's office. So that's all I have for the staff report. Are there any questions or concerns about that? Okay. All right, well, that's all I have for the staff report.
Thank you, Braden. Is there any unfinished business before the commission this evening?
No.
No unfinished business. That takes us to new business. The item under new business is the Youth Services Grant Program, and you provided us with a memo on that, Braden.
I'm coming down here now. I have a little PowerPoint slide. So there's information in the memo, which is just kind of where we're explaining our previous year program and then kind of what we're looking at for next year. And now I'm just going to walk through a little bit of a presentation that we have for the program as well. So I'll get started with that. And throughout, you'll see some wonderful pictures that these were provided by some of the agencies that we funded this previous year. So this picture that you see here was from the Well Experience, which is an organization down on Philo Road that works with teens, preteens, and has a lot of great activities. So we're very happy to have been able to work with them. So before I start talking about next year's youth grant process, I wanted to just cover some of our accomplishments from the previous grant cycle, so from 2021, 2022. You can see here just some statistics about different clients that have been served and the types of agencies we've been funding. So for the 2021-2022 year, City of Urbana funding reached 340 Urbana youth. 54% were from very low to extremely low income households, and over half of those households had a female head of household. In terms of the agencies we funded last year, 66% had majority minority leadership, meaning their staff and board were over 50% minority. And then we also funded small agencies and some agencies that hadn't received funding before. So 1/3 of agencies had fewer than 10 employees or volunteers. And then here are just some more pictures from those programs. The two pictures on the left-hand side of the screen are from the Well Experience, Well Family Care Program. And then on the right, you see pictures from Hip Hop Express program at Lincoln Square Mall. So for the 2022-2023 year, we are excited that we are going to have a little bit of a larger budget this year, and that's due. So for those of you who are maybe newer or don't remember, typically every year the city has $100,000 that we can commit to like social service programs. And that is made up, and you'll see it on the chart here, that's made up of $25,000 in community development block grant funding, and that's funding that comes directly from HUD, and then $75,000 in city general funds. And so that's typically every year been the pool, $100,000. This year we have $300,000, approximately $300,000, which is very exciting. And that is because we received a grant, the city received a grant from the Illinois Department of Human Services for violence prevention programming. So that was a very sizable grant that we're going to be able to add to this pot of money. And then we also have some, you'll see that 8% of some unexpended prior year funds that we weren't able to commit to projects. So that's going to just roll over into this next year. So that's kind of where the money's coming from. For next year's cycle of youth services grant funding. So the key service areas. You all provided guidance to staff in 2021 when the Consolidated Social Service Funding Program went away. That program was a partnership with the city and Cunningham Township. And after the pandemic, we kind of reevaluated things and sort of went our separate ways on this. So you all provided guidance and and City Council provided guidance as well, that they really wanted, and you all really wanted funding geared toward youth. So once staff received that guidance, we came up with the Youth Services Grant Program and developed these 3 key service areas. So these are kind of broader categories: health, well-being, and opportunity. So looking at funding programs that provide, mental health, trauma support for Urbana youth, well-being, meaning anything from after-school programs, educational programs, things of that nature, and then opportunity, so job training or again, after-school programs that focus on maybe skills training or things like that. So we're hoping to keep these key service areas into the next year as well. But with this new grant that we got from the Illinois Department of Human Services, we're hoping to add a focus on violence prevention, again, because we received that grant opportunity. We're hoping to be able to incorporate that into this next round of funding requests for next year. And then another change we're looking to make in the 2022-2023 grant cycle is to move toward 2-year grant agreements. So that meaning, so if we have agencies apply for the funding, and then if we decide we want to fund them, we can, instead of just having a 1-year grant agreement, which can be kind of limiting, and it's burdensome for the agency to have to apply every year, and it can be burdensome on staff to have to go through the process every year. So we talked about moving toward 2-year grant agreements, which again would just provide more stability, more funding stability for agencies, and then also kind of help staff be able to just make things a little bit easier. And then also for this year, we are going to have a longer open application period. So it's usually every year a pretty quick turnaround. We typically allow about 30 days or so, about a month, for agencies to apply, which we know is a little bit of a burden because applying for a grant can take some time. So this year we are proposing having a 2-month application period so that agencies have more time to submit their applications. Some other details for this next year's process: we will be using our online grant management software again, so agencies will be submitting applications virtually, which we think works really well. During that 2-month open application period, staff will be holding 2 separate applicant assistance workshops just for any agencies that have questions about how to apply, or again, we want to remove as many barriers as possible so that maybe smaller agencies or groups in the community that haven't been able to receive grants before can have as much support as possible. We will be recording a training video on how to apply, how to use the grant management software, and then posting that to our website so it's easily accessible. And then also having regularly updated FAQ sections. So as we get questions about the process, we can post those publicly, and everyone who's applying can have access to the same information. So I won't spend too much time on this. It is in your packet. This is a draft of the scoring tool that we will use, that staff will use to evaluate applications that we receive. So again, we will be looking at a variety of criteria when agencies submit applications. We want to see that they, that they have some experience, operating these types of programs. We want to see that they, are really doing the good work in the community and that they have the support that they need to manage the grant funds. And then, also looking at their budgets, making sure their costs and expenses are reasonable and that we can support them appropriately. So, again, this is just a draft at this point. We will have an internal committee of staff, city council members as well, who will be scoring applications. And so this might change, and if it does, I will, you will all be notified. But this is the draft that we have at this point. So timeline. We are hoping, and this timeline is also tentative, things can change, so this might shift a little bit. At this point, we're hoping to launch the applications January 30th, and then have them open until March 31st. So again, offering more time for agencies to be able to apply so they don't feel a rush to get things done. Again, as I mentioned, 2 separate applicant assistance workshops, one kind of early in the process, right at the beginning on February 3rd, and then one later on, closer to the deadline, in case there are any last-minute concerns or issues that come up on March 24th. And those will be advertised widely through the city's social media, and then through the different community groups that we are involved with as well. So the internal committee will be meeting to evaluate and score the applications. We're hoping in early April. Again, those dates might change, but we're hoping for the first couple weeks of April to get that process completed. And then I left out come before the Community Development Commission, which that will happen before it goes to City Council. Like all of our grant applications, those come before you all first for kind of the initial recommendations before they go to City Council. But we hope to have the whole process wrapped up by the end of April. And that way we can have grant agreements executed on July 1, 2023. And then hopefully we'd be able to have them July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2025, if we're able to do the 2-year grant agreements. So in terms of recommendations, and you'll see this in the memo as well, there are kind of really 3 changes that we're hoping to make, and this is what we're recommending to you tonight. To retain the focus on youth, we think that's really important. We've heard a lot in the community about how it's important to that youth programming and funding and support for that programming is very important. But again, to kind of add an additional focus on violence prevention programming and for agencies that deal with specifically with violence prevention. And then lastly, moving toward those 2-year grant agreements so we can provide more stable funding to agencies that apply. So that's all I have for the presentation, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Yeah, and like I said, this timeline is draft. This was my most optimistic timeline. It's kind of we hope to have it wrapped up by the end of April. So, hopefully being able to go to City Council either that last week of April or early into May, potentially. Again, this was my. If everything went the way I would have it go, then this would be my timeline. But it'll probably change. So thank you for pointing that out, and we will update you all about the timeline as well as it changes.
Braden, I would echo what Patty just said, that it should reduce the administrative burden to have this application, review, allocation, monitoring. Well, I guess the monitoring goes on for 2 years, but it just lets you focus more on the program and less on the administrative. I think it's an excellent idea to go from 1 to 2 years.
If I may, just a couple of questions on the logistics of that 2-year setup. So I note here that we would need some HUD approval to basically pre-allocate the 23-24 funds. But I don't see that reflected in that pie chart.
Yeah. So let me pull this up really quick. So the HUD funding, the CDBG is $25,000 worth. So it's kind of a smaller slice. So for that portion, you're right. We're not able to commit it until we have HUD approval, which typically lags a little bit. So typically in the past, what we've done, and we communicate this to our applicants if we decide to give them, CDBG money, we communicate with them some of the restrictions. Those agreements are not executed until HUD approves it. So there's sometimes a little bit of a different timeline for that funding. It's still all in the same pool in the sense that, it's going toward the same types of programming, but typically it does, we're not able to execute those agreements until that HUD approval is there. So we kind of hold those I mean, we
Right.
accept the programming, but we don't execute the agreements until our annual action plan is approved.
Yeah, what I'm trying to understand is this pie chart represents $300,000 roughly worth of investment for this year, which normally would be 25,000 in CDBG and 75,000 from general funds.
Right.
So when we skip ahead to next year, when we're in the middle of these 2-year grants, that explains hopefully where the 25,000 of CDBG funds will be coming from. Will there be an additional 75,000 from general funds going in next year or not?
At this point, I don't know for sure about that. That decision's a little bit above my pay grade. But
I'm just asking from the standpoint, we have traditionally been putting $100,000 a year into this.
yes.
I don't want to see a $300 smoke screen this year turn into $0 next year or 25,000
no.
where we're not getting the same overall funding.
Yes.
Yeah.
The funding, at least the CDBG portion will be, because we have that cap in our funding, that public service cap that we have to commit to public service projects. So that funding will be there, absolutely. Again, it will take some time for kind of that approval, but it's not going to go from 25 to 0. It'll still be there.
Then the next question is on the logistics of that. So we're getting applications and we're allocating, say, $300,000 worth of funding over 2 years. If there's another $100,000 that gets added to that next year, where does that go? Are there new applications, or is it just sitting there, waiting for the 2-year cycle?
We could, there would be many different options that staff would take to you all to consider what to do with that. So it's still, the money's still there, and we would still
Right.
commit it to these types of projects. We'll need to work with all of you to kind of come up with, okay, well, how can we do that? And how can we make sure that, that funding is still getting out the door? So that'll be a little bit of an ongoing conversation. We think for the agencies, though, to have that kind of secured 2 years, that's kind of what we want to prioritize.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I've seen funding changes and things before, and the problem is the unintended consequences.
Sure.
Where this turns into a $200,000 fund every 2 years, as
Right.
opposed to a 100 every one.
Right.
And then people trying to apply
Right.
that are new organizations, they have up to a 2-year wait to kind of get in front of it. And the other good thing about being able to give out more funding to groups for a longer period of time, I agree with all of that, but organizations do become dependent upon some of that funding. So you could have a situation where this is an unusually large pool this year, but all of those organizations 2 years from now are probably going to need at least the same amount of funding for the following 2 years, and it won't necessarily be there. So it just bringing up some of which I'm sure you've considered many of those, but I do think we have to be careful about the unintended consequences.
Yes, absolutely. And and just to that point, I mean, I agree with you. And like I said, that's something that we'll bring back to all of you to consider. In terms of that, I mean, we are aware of kind of how agencies, we are aware of that issue, which is why when we build that kind of scoring rubric, that's why we do look at, okay, how are these agencies leveraging other funds? We are pretty explicit in all of our sort of training materials that we do not want to be the sole funder of a program for that reason. And as a result, applicants who have a diverse portfolio of funding will kind of be at the front of the line.
Right.
Precisely for that reason. So that's kind of how that scoring rubric is built to reflect that. And so, but yes, in terms of, we don't want, to freeze anyone out in terms of that 2-year agreement. That's not the intention. So we'll definitely bring to you kind of different ideas or solutions, and you all will have an opportunity to provide feedback on that.
Very good. Thank you.
Braden, regarding this youth services grant program, are you looking for the commission to make recommendation to council?
Yes,
Okay.
based on those kind of the three
Okay.
So again, retaining the focus on youth services, adding that violence prevention focus as well, and then the ability to move toward 2-year grant agreements, because that is something that City Council will have to be able to approve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any more questions for Braden about the program? So is there a motion for a recommendation to council?
I move that we forward this recommendation to a council for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. So we will forward that to council with a recommendation for approval. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And since we've exhausted the agenda, the meeting is adjourned.